said she may be a little faster. Oh, I'm not.
So I guess that's Ed Latham's personal bowl of I just thought they were pretty much in the place over there. No, I don't.
I have not had any lunch or breakfast.
Honey.
Ed, you want to, I got granola bar back there.
You've been going 100 miles an hour, it sounds like.
We're going to call our meeting to order. I'd like to welcome you to our meeting this afternoon, and I would ask if you have cell phones, if you would, to please turn them off at this time. We will stand and have pledge of allegiance by Councilmember Wackenhauser and prayer by Councilmember Reed.
If you would like to pray with us, would you please remain standing? Dear God of us all, we thank you for this day, a day that you have made, a day, Lord, that we shall all rejoice and be glad in. Thank you for the appropriate time. Thank you for the agenda that is set before us. We ask you to allow us to make decisions that's best for the city of Madison. Amen.
Okay. I'm just
Our clerk will let the record know that all our council members are present tonight. Approval of minutes of our previous meetings. Our call meeting on November 18th, 2022. Our work session of December 3rd, 2021. Our regular meeting of December 13th, 2021. And you notice you have call meeting of December 23rd, 2022. Those minutes are not ready yet, so we will not be voting on those minutes.
Mr.
But-
Mayor?
Yes.
There was no meeting. We had an agenda.
That one,
item.
okay, good. Regular meeting of January the 10th, 2022. We can get a motion to approve those minutes. In that order, please.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for November 18th, 2022, 2021. Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yes.
Work session, December 3rd, 2021. Regular meeting, December 13th, 2021. Call meeting, December 23rd, 2021. Regular meeting, January 10th, 2022.
Right. Okay. After hearing that motion, all in favor? Is that second?
Second.
Are there any more discussion?
It's not the 23rd. I don't believe that's included, is it?
Call minute, there were no
There's
minutes
no-
for December 23rd. Right, right.
Excluding December 23rd, 2021.
There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposers, none, vote unanimously. Approval of order of agenda items and items that have comments and come before us, consent agenda and zoning hearing. I'd like to get a motion to move 11B up to 8A, and we'll make 8A 8B. This is Arbor Day proclamation. We can move that up to 8A.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposers, none. Vote unanimously. Thank you so much. At this time, we will have Mr. Rick Crown with the Green Space, who's our Green Space Chairman, to come. He will introduce the person that's with him to read this proclamation to us tonight.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We are here with a wonderful, green, glorious news in these interesting times, and to celebrate the good green work that Madison has been doing for 32 years. Back when our current city manager was the city clerk, and the city council decided that we should become a tree city. And I think Lynn Hunt spearheaded that. And scarily, I have been on the tree board, now the Green Space Commission, for those entire 32 years. I think David's done a little bit better than me. He's moved up in the world. But we're here to read the proclamation of Arbor Day. And here with us are Anna Nolan, coming from a long, illustrious Morgan County family, and Christian Keener with the Junior Conservancy. So.
I'll introduce us, the Junior Conservancy. I don't know how to. So the Junior Conservancy is committed to helping further the missions of groups like the Green Space Committee. And so we do hope that the young people in this county can become more engaged and interested in preserving our natural resources, because we have some good ones, natural and historical resources. So without further ado, I will let Christian go ahead and read the proclamation.
Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of our business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas Madison has been recognized as a tree city USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting ways, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Madison, do hereby proclaim February 18th, 2022 as Arbor Day in the City of Madison, and we urge all citizens to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to support our city's urban forestry program. And further, we urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of future generations. Dates this 14th day of February 2022.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank
There you go, kids, young ladies.
Well done.
Thank you.
Did you bring us each a tree to plant?
Come see us Friday at Lambert Park, where the tree Arbor Day celebration will be. Isn't it? You might end up.
What time will that be, Rick? What,
11 o'clock.
Friday. Good.
This time, our public hearing, text amendment, Brooks Pennington, addition of community church as permitted use in the general commercial zoning district C3 and section 620.3, table 7. Bryce.
Thank you, sir.
This is actually a relatively short text amendment, and it was a very short public hearing. The applicant is requesting an amendment for the neighborhood commercial district, general commercial district C3. Specifically, he is asking to allow neighborhood, community churches, which is for purposes of a brief review of that. Neighborhood churches are up to 300 people, community churches are 301 to 600, and mega churches are the big ones. There's 601, and how many you can go from there. Currently in the C3 zoning district, the other two, the smallest and the largest, are permitted uses. The applicant is interested in allowing the in-between size to fit in there, and his logic is, it was very compelling to the Planning Commission, which gave a unanimous recommendation, simply that if the larger and smaller are permitted use, if someone simply has to drop their church to 299 or raise it to 601 as permitted use, it seemed incongruous to him. And again, Planning Commission agreed, gave a unanimous recommendation for approval. So in this case, it's a very straightforward change, and it would make it a permitted use. So if this is passed by the mayor and council, it would just basically mean any church of any size is permitted there, and that would just be up to the church's discretion on how they went about it.
Are there any questions for Bryce?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may. Interestingly, I'm wondering, since the mega church and the neighborhood church were previously included in the planning for C3, is there any, do you have any sense of why community was not included?
I think part of that was because, well, actually, some of those decisions are sort of vestigial decisions. In general, we haven't gone through closely to change all things in the zoning ordinance, which is part of the reason why we have the text amendment process, so we can respond to changes when there's a demand. Because if we start going through too exuberantly looking to patch everything, it either signals we want that sort of development or puts us in a position of spending a lot of time for no one ever going to request it or bring it in.
Right, I understand. So it sounds to me then, what I'm hearing you say is that possibly or probably that a text amendment was requested for C3 for perhaps the mega church and for a neighborhood church, and that's why those now are permitted use, and no one so far has come forward for community church. Would that be
I'd have to do a full detailed research, but I've been here since 2007, and no one has requested those changes. So this language, as far as I can tell, predates my arrival, so, which is about 3 or 4 zoning ordinances ago.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate that. Our public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here who wants to speak against this text amendment? Brooke Pendleton, addition of community church as a permitted use in the general commercial zone in District C3 and Section 620.3, Table 7. Anyone here to speak against it? Are there anybody here to speak for it? If not, this public hearing is closed and it's back to our council for debate. Motion or second?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Shouldn't we have a motion on the table?
Yeah, we're
One way,
ready.
is that, I mean, that's
We're
what I'm
ready for
saying.
that, we're ready for that motion now for discussion.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the text amendment for addition of community church as a permitted use in general commercial zoning district C3 in section 620.3, table 7.
Second.
Are there any more discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could, when I was looking at the chart, I'm in my never-ending quest for some kind of consistency. I really didn't find it in that chart in terms of what's allowed. I'm sure it's there in my not understanding the intricacies of zoning, but I'm looking at, I didn't see a pattern of, for example, a mega church is permitted in C3 and C4. It's not permitted in some of the other commercial districts. It's also a conditional use in P1, which is almost like a downtown related zoning. So I'm seeing kind of all over the board, but it doesn't make sense to me that within C3, which is the application's request here, I don't see why we would allow smaller churches mega churches, but not the medium-sized churches. There's no logic in that I see at any rate. So even though I'm not seeing any real patterns of consistency as it's spread around throughout all the different zoning areas, I do think just to stay consistent within C3, it just makes abundant sense to me to approve this and make all three sizes of churches available. Why would we say a mega church is appropriate in there and a little teeny neighborhood church, but not a medium one? I don't really understand why that wouldn't have been in there in the first place. So I intend to support this.
Thank you, Councilmember George. Are there any more discussion? If not, all in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none, vote unanimously. Thank you so much. Contract with Georgia Department of Transportation, TAP grant, request for qualification. Mr. Nunn? That's you.
Mr. Mayor, I think that is that Monica?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Distracted. And just as a sidebar, I didn't want to extend your discussion, but I think that the wrong church, the smaller church, was tattooed. I think the wrong category was tattooed on the smaller church in the original zoning ordinance.
Well,
it was supposed to be mega and mid-size because
That would add to the goal for logic. You know.
but it's in the correction list. We just hadn't gotten to it yet. Mr. Pennington beat us to it.
I was thinking about that too, but we have been known for places of worship to come into shopping centers.
That's true.
And that would be the smallest kind of incubator space for a small church. And I don't know if that was the thinking. I don't know why the middle church was left out.
We don't have a note on every land use that's in the zoning
I know
ordinance.
that, but if it may help to think about not necessarily that specific use, but what is it like? How many cars are there? How much of a parking lot you need? What a mega church in
A mega
other
church
small
functions
areas.
like an arena, and that's why it's in C3, because its volume and its use is periodic and the volume of traffic.
But it's also, it's a conditional use in P1 as well.
Yes, sir, it is.
Right, but P1 is not downtown. P1's out like where the old hospital is.
Yep. P1's pure
Yeah,
institutional.
You're right.
P2's the donut.
Thank you, yeah. P2 is downtown.
Anyway, so sidebar, what we were on transportation or the
Right,
CDBG?
transportation.
Okay, yes, sir. So in order to accept the $430,000 grant for Phase 1 for our transportation project, which is roughly a $1.9 million sidewalk transportation trails, sidewalks, crosswalks project that goes in the gateway, you have to execute a formal agreement with DOT, just like you do with your other grants, and this is the forward draft of that. It will be reviewed for consistency and form by legal. It might have an edit or two that DOT legal gets to it, but it is at the 95% mark, and this is a standardized form. We don't really have any discretion on the content, but it is for a little bit.
DOT.
It is a boilerplate DOT, and so it's before you tonight, and I would request that you would sign that, or authorize the mayor to sign. Next step in the process, to kind of give you where we go next, is after this agreement is executed, we will actually start formal procurement for design and engineering services. There will be an RFQ prepared. The RFQ will be posted on the state website that for procurement. We'll also post that in the local newspaper, and procurement will run roughly 4 weeks, and there'll be an ad in the local paper. So we will be looking for an engineering and design firm.
Thank you.
Any questions that you might have for me, I will try my best to answer.
So you mentioned the $430,000, but this particular contract has no specificity about, and that's kind of what the grant is from GDOT until we actually get farther into the next set of contracts.
Yes, sir. DOT has lots of paper. This is the piece that allows for, basically it says that we're going to handle local procurement, we're going to follow state rules for GDOT, and GDOT by translation, the transitive property, we are also following the Federal Highway Administration law. And so this is our agreement that we're going to follow everything correctly to the best of our ability, and that we will be administering it locally. and that you are accepting that and moving forward. I wouldn't be surprised if you'll see a couple of documents over the next couple of months as we get started. This is not the contract for service from the procurement for engineering services. You'll get that separate.
Thank you, Monica.
Yes, sir.
If we could get a motion and a second to approve this contract with Georgia Department of Transportation.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign this agreement.
Second.
Are there any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposes none, vote unanimously. Thank you so much. Monica? CDBG?
Yes, sir. So just like you signed your starter paperwork for CDBG, and then you move on to procurement, this is the procurement stage for CDBG. So we've done all of our initial paperwork. They're ready, that we've gotten the release of funds so that Karen can start writing checks out of the CDBG account. And so our first contract post-advertisement was for architectural design services. We did score those, review the bids, and the lowest responsible bidder on that project was AMT, Armentrout, I never get it all, Armentrout, Matheny, and Thurman, thank you. So they are the lowest responsible bidder, and so they have a contract, and we are looking forward to the mayor being able to sign that so the Boys and Girls Club can get into the design phase. They hope to be under construction and procure construction services in June. So this is not procurement for construction. If you have any contractor buddies, remind them there will be a separate procurement process for that. This is only for design services.
Thank you, Monica. And this is really good news for the original middle school here in our community. It's great news. It really is. So we can get a motion and a second to approve this CDBG
Could I ask a question or two, Mayor?
Sure.
Why is the contract with the city, with the city of Madison, when the land is owned by the DDA? I realize the DDA is kind of the city, but are we, and if I've got my numbers right, correct me if I got some of this wrong, the grant is for about half of the, I think, option 3 total of about $1.5 million, and the grant was for approximately half of that. They need to raise the rest of those funds.
Right. Okay. So what
if that doesn't come to pass?
Right. Your
Who's
question,
responsible?
Right. Your question's very astute because it is not a uncomplicated deal. So the grant was for $750,000, and the Boys and Girls Club have pledged to match that with $800,000. So at no point is the city on the hook for the second portion of that amount. That is Boys and Girls Club's portion of that. They are providing the match. So when we did the grant, they had to sign a grant obligation letter that obligated them to their match. The city's match was, or we call it in-kind services when we write a grant. It's not a match per se because people think of that as a 50-50 or 80-20. The city's in-kind services were in 2 forms. One is y'all out of general fund paid for the grant writing services, which was about $8 grand, and that was your front end. And then you also are acting as the fiscal agent, because the grant can only be made to a city or county government. So therefore, the grant is made to the city acts as the fiscal agent, the bills come into the city pays the bills, we pull down the grant reimbursements, and we pull in the Boys and Girls Club match. And so we are the fiscal agency. We will not be able to take that first draw until after we do the transfer of the property. So over the next month, you'll see DDA turn in the formal request to BOE, because BOE currently owns the property. So
Yeah.
BOE will transfer the property to the city, and then the city will execute its long-term lease agreement with DDA, because the city has to be in the possessor of the property. So the property will actually be in the city's name.
So when I looked at the county tax assessor's Q Public, and it shows the school board owning that land, that's actually correct?
That is accurate probably for the next 30 days, yes, sir.
Wow.
So the way our intergovernmental agreements are written is that if the grant were forthcoming, then the property transfer would take place and you'd start to see the intergovernmental agreements collapse for portions of the property. So at this point, we haven't taken possession of the land because we wanted to make sure we had an exit strategy and that there was the grant forthcoming for Boys and Girls Club.
So did you say then their matching share that they need to raise, which is a substantial amount of money?
They're going to be making more than 50% of the investment in this project.
And if that, so our obligation, there, no money will be spent, we won't get that grant until they make their matching fund amount?
We will pull down our $750,000. So you will be in receipt of $750,000 from the state. We will pull ours down as a 50-50 match roughly each time we have an expense. So let's say we have a $30,000 architectural expense and we're fronting it. We'll front the $30,000 check and make Karen nervous a little bit. And then Karen will turn in the draw request from the state. 15 will come from the state. We'll turn in our draw request from Boys and Girls Club, and 15 will be pulled in from B&G.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a great project. I just want to make sure that our
Yeah, all the grant stuff
financial responsibilities don't exceed.
is super layered and
right.
super not fun sometimes.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
And I can testify, Mr. Councilmember George, that the Boys and Girls Club are working really hard for this match, and they are doing exceedingly well.
Really good.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just
Good.
local, Councilmember Joyce. I think the regional is kicking in on assistance, right?
You're right.
So again, just as a review for our taxpayers, the City of Madison won't have any end dollars into the Boys and Girls Club facility. If we do, it's nominal, $200 for advertising or something here and there, but nothing that wouldn't fit in my normal planning budget. We won't be engaging in any construction dollars. Any
Thanks,
other
Monica.
questions?
If we can get a motion and a second to approve this CDBG architectural contract for the Boys and Girls Club,
With AMT.
A&T.
So moved.
Second.
There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, none, to vote unanimously. We're down to election of Mayor Pro Tem, and let me just make a couple of comments before we get into this election. I believe at our last work session, Councilmember Reed brought up that she thought it was only fair that every council member have an opportunity to serve as Mayor Pro Tem. And all of us know that it has been the city, which is nothing set in stone, that the longest serving council member serves as Mayor Pro Tem. Not to say that it can't be changed, but, and I don't know if Councilmember Reed wanted to change it at this time, but give us some time to talk about it in the future, and then come back and make some decisions. Councilor Reed, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
I would like for us to discuss it a little bit more. Since we didn't do January, we can talk about it a little bit more in a call meeting. But I also want Rick to know that it was not at Rick. My conversation was about the position, not about Rick. So it was about the position, but I want us to take time and discuss it. Vote tonight, and then in 2 years, we can add in whatever we need to add in or do whatever we need to do. Because I know it's every 2 years.
All right. So are you saying that if the council desired to allow our Mayor Pro Tem to remain as Mayor Pro Tem for the next 2 years?
If that's what the council wishes.
Okay. Mr. Carter?
I think we need to take a look and be careful about amending the charter. We have the power to amend the charter for a whole lot of stuff, and we're amending the charter, for the district lines, that's specifically, okay? There is a law that it makes an exception to the city's power to amend a charter if it affects the election or the appointment of officials. Frankly, I think that the law is talking mostly about the method of electing the people to the city council in the first place, but the city charters specifically created the office of the Mayor Pro Tem and says it's elected by the people that get elected to come here. So that's not to say that it can't be amended, but my question is whether it's one of those things that's going to take a legislative act to amend the charter, as opposed to ours simply saying, we're taking this away from an elected process and putting it on a rotation process. The law is ambiguous, but it does cloud the issue, and I think we need to take a look at that before we change the method of selecting the mayor pro tem.
Right. So that's why I think that it'll give us some time to talk about it, Mr. Carter. and then
I
we'll
couldn't
see.
find any cases one way or the other on it. There's so many things in the city charters and this kind of thing that just don't come up.
Right.
But is there not a middle ground between a pro tem for life, because they're always the senior person until they get de-elected, they're always going to be the senior person, and having it rotate? I mean, there's
Well,
still-
you would have to,
doesn't
you can
have to
rotate it
be
by
one or the other.
election.
There's a lot of room in between.
The city could, if you wanted it to rotate, you just simply vote for the next person in line, but for a 2-year term. But there's nothing in there that says that person cannot succeed themselves. Somebody could be mayor pro tem for years simply because they have a 2-year term, get elected for a 2-year term every time, but.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yes.
may.
Yes.
I like the point that basically Councilman Joyce brought up, but I don't feel like, I feel like it would be extreme to talk about changing the charter, amending the charter
Yes.
to do something different. Again, I think if the council did like the idea of rotating the mayor pro tem, then just it could be an intentional vote that as a council, we make that choice to say, it's kind of with intent, just as now it seems to be the intention that the oldest member, no, I'm kidding, but the longest serving member on the council, kind of a default to that, that we could just change our intention and make it, and step out of the status quo and allow for some change within the council and have a vote on, kind of vote with the intention of rotating.
And that's why I think
it's a
it's-
very special office because it's one of the few times the mayor votes.
Right,
And
yeah.
So everybody on the council, including the mayor, votes on the mayor pro tem.
And that's why I think it's just so important that we don't rush into it. Like Councilmember Reed say, let's take some time and talk about it, because I like for all the council members to be on the same page, so we'll talk about it. Councilmember Latham.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I really feel that we need to vote tonight and vote on, because we have to vote. We haven't.
Yeah, we
have not had
are
that
going to
vote.
come back
Have
and
to
vote.
vote, yes.
And let's do the vote and do it that way, and then, because we didn't do it in January when we were supposed to.
Well, the charter does say that they serve until the successor's elected, although it is for a 2-year term. Till you elect somebody else, they're still mayor pro tem.
Right.
And if I could, I want to reiterate what Kerry said. However this ends up tonight, I really hope that Councilmember Blanton doesn't take it as anything personal against what
Right, it's
he's
not
done.
personal.
I think we made that clear last time at the discussion. And I was very surprised when I read the charter. I've read it before, but I evidently missed that part. And I always kind of assumed that the tradition in the charter stressed seniority, and I was very surprised when it didn't. It just mentioned 2-year terms.
Yes.
The mayor has a vote, no seconds are needed, nothing whatsoever about qualifications. And I think there might be some benefit to letting all of us develop our own skills, maybe run the meeting on our own at some point. Not to say that institutionalizes a rotation system. We still should have a vote every 2 years, as the charter says, but let people decide whether they think seniority is the most important thing or other factors.
I think
That's my
excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Mayor, may I?
Sure.
So seniority is not in our charter. Seniority is just kind of what we started doing, am I correct?
Down through the years,
Okay,
yes.
so we vote every 2 years, but not because of seniority. We
Right.
vote for who we would like to be Mayor Pro Tem.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if there are no more discussion, if we can get a motion on the table?
Are you looking for a motion to elect someone?
Yes,
Are
sir.
we, so you're asking for nominations?
Nominations?
And you don't have to have a second for a nomination on this procedure
Okay.
in the charter. Whoever gets nominated is on the slate.
Mr. Mayor, I nominate Rick Belton.
Blanton.
And Mr. Mayor, I would nominate Councilperson Peters Reed.
Okay. All in favor of Mayor Pro Tem Rick Blanton, raise your hand. All in favor, Councilmember Carrie Peters Reed, raise your hand. So we don't need a second, is that right? Mr. Attorney, we don't need a second, is that right?
No, you don't need a
That is
second,
right.
but you have a tie.
You have a tie vote.
You got a tie
Do we
vote.
have a
tie.
tiebreaker?
We have a tie.
And in my reading of the charter, there's no specifications about how they solve that.
So we'll ask our attorney to solve it for us.
Sorry.
We'll ask our attorney to solve this for us.
Well, you've got to elect a mayor pro tem. You have a serving mayor pro tem, and if you don't have an election of a successor, the one in office stays in office.
That's right.
For a 2-year term?
Yes.
So,
Mr. Mayor, maybe
Yes.
if I may. The reason I made that motion is
Sure.
excuse me, is I think it's good that we stay with Rick for now, and let's make plans to figure out, you know, I believe that if a city councilman wants to be mayor pro tem, they need to be prepared, and they need to take some training, and I said that when we were talking about this before, and I just feel that's very important. And
I totally agree with you, but what would make you think that I don't have training?
pardon?
I totally agree with you, but if you're speaking of me, what would make you think that I don't have training?
I'm not speaking of you. I don't know who has training. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I mean, that had nothing to do with
Okay.
Carrie.
Thank you.
I mean, I had made that before.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yeah,
may.
Sure.
I appreciated what Councilmember Joyce said when we were talking about this in the last meeting, or whenever it was, the last time we met and we're talking about pro tem, saying that, you know, we felt like the Councilmember Blanton did a great job, especially in the face that you were never absent, you know. So it's really kind of hard, this job especially, you know, for our council is not particularly an onus one, only because you are so good about being here and showing up. Again, I'm the new kid on the block, so it kind of, to me, I don't get why this has to, you know, we have to stick with the status quo because we're not ready for a change. Well, what is that? I don't get that. I mean, what is, you know, first of all, and I totally understand, but even when we're talking, and that's fine if you know, I'm happy for any of these council members to serve as pro tem, but I think that's what I'm saying is when we're talking about experience or qualifications of any sort, first of all, I feel like Council Member Carrie Peters Reed has been on this council for for quite a long time already, has lots of experience, lots of training. Not that she's more qualified than Council Member Blanton or anyone. I'm just saying that it's all rather equal, and it's kind of, I mean, I feel like we are treating this as if this is like some absolute major change that really has to be studied and investigated. And maybe it is. Maybe I don't get it. But on the other hand, we've all been elected to serve, and we're all going, I mean, I'm, of course, being the junior, there's a lot more training for me to do. But I kind of don't get why this is something that requires heavy discussion.
Right, and let's just be fair, a decision has been made. I think we're gonna talk about it in the future. The Mayor Pro Tem is gonna serve for the next 2 years, you know. And let's be clear, Councilmember Reed said that there's no status quo with her. There was nothing against Mayor Pro Tem Blanton or any other council member that's around this table. But I have one concern, and my concern is this, and we're going to try to move on from this. But I think, Bessie, Councilmember Wagenhouse, you need an opportunity to also work with this Mayor Pro Tem. I just think it's unfair to just come on as a council member and you've already proceeded how it's going to be, and you vote against someone that you have not had an opportunity to work with. So we sit around this table to work together as council members, you know. And I hope that we can continue to do that without any animosity against any council member around this table, you know. And I think in the future, I think it's going to make us even better.
Absolutely.
But again, it's going to give us an opportunity to talk about this and discuss this later on.
Great.
Sure.
And if I may.
Sure.
And I am still learning. You're
Sure.
absolutely right. And I'm just as happy with the decision as had it been the other.
Absolutely.
But just to I think, frame it a little differently.
Okay.
I did not vote against Councilmember Blanton. I
Okay.
voted for
Right.
Councilmember
You're right.
Reed.
I was thinking the same thing. I think that was a little
No, that
unfair,
was-
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
to Councilmember
Yeah.
Wagenhauser, in my opinion, your comment there.
Mr. Mac?
Yes.
Rick, are you going to say something, Rick?
Yeah.
please?
I am, but I'm trying to
Get the,
I'm
think about
stopped.
it.
I saw you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sure.
And I appreciate I appreciate everyone's effort to make sure that I don't feel personally attacked.
Yes.
Thank you. And as I tried to say in the last meeting, is, you know, Madison will be fine, whomever, anybody on this board or future board to serve. It's something you don't do often. I'm happy to do it, and I'm also happy if someone else is Mayor Pro Tem. I served under other Mayor Pro Tems for a long time. To me, where it got a little bit, and I agree, Betsy, with if it's just the will of the council, right? If the will of the council is, and mayor in this case, if 4 people vote for somebody, then they're the Mayor Pro Tem. Where it got a little bit confusing to me was when you prefaced your discussions last time was that you went to a meeting and it was part of a conflict resolution training that you went to, and I just didn't see where it resolves any conflict if I'm the Mayor Pro Tem. And that's one of the things that added, and then you mentioned, and you may have thought differently of it, but you mentioned term limits.
Yes,
And-
I did.
And that's kind of that's a big subject that can have a lot of,
Yes.
so I think if this body wants to talk about term limits, then that's a whole nother, but I don't think just term limit. But again, if somebody just wants
Right.
someone else to be Mayor Pro Tem, it doesn't have to be the second or the longest serving council member.
Right. That's the part.
But
That might,
those two reasons that were put forth were, to me, a little bit, I just didn't get my arms wrapped around that.
Right. So I was in conflict resolution class, and we had other discussions. So conflict resolutions class, they had an argument in their city about term limits. And I was like, oh, I've never even thought of term limits. I was like, so we have long-standing people in different positions. Long-standing is good sometimes. Sometimes it's not good. So I was bringing that back. So I was talking about a little bit of everything. But conflict resolution it just happened to be the class that I was in. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
one last thing and I'll be done.
Sure.
I like the idea of rotating, and I didn't
Yes.
say I'm not for it. Mr. Mayor, I think this could be a work session at some point in time, because what I think we might want to do is identify the succession. That way, you know, like it can rotate, and it's planned. It's just like you're going to be, what, of the GMA?
Third vice president.
Right.
And then you'll eventually be president.
Right.
Right.
And so that's something I think we could do here and just rotate around. But that's for a work session discussion.
That's exactly what I was saying in the work session. We can rotate around. We can take time to look into it. But I was in conflict resolution class, and that's what they were talking about, term limits. I think it was in Conyers. And they actually got into an argument about term limits. And I was talking about we have so many people in seats forever. We talked about progression and we talked about regression. So I thought in our charter that it stated that the longest standing city council person had to be mayor pro tem. But when I read the charter, it did not state that. So that's why I brought it to a work session so that we could discuss it and to see where we were going.
Right.
So I'm fine with Rick being mayor pro tem again. But I want us to discuss it rotating so that every council member will get a turn to be mayor pro tem, not based on how long they've been here, based on who the council chooses at that time in 2 years.
Absolutely.
It should not have anything to do with longevity. It should have something to do with what the council would like to see.
And Mr.
And, you know,
Mayor,
that could be done just by a vote without amending anything.
Right.
Yes.
If you wanted to make it a custom, you know, that's just a courtesy, you don't have to amend the charter to do something like
Right.
that.
Right.
But
That's
you can't
right.
make it a binding rule or amend, I don't believe you can amend the charter to change the mayor pro tem without my doing some more research into it, because I know what the charter says and I know what the code says about amending a charter to change the term or the manner of election of an officer, of which the mayor pro tem is. But I'll be glad to look at that. I'll be glad to write y'all, do a memo or come to a work session and talk about it.
Well, Mr. Carter, if this council can agree that further down the road, have a discussion about the rotation of mayor pro tem, you might not have to have a charter change. It'll just be an agreement among these council members, among the
Right.
council members.
And I want to thank Rick for his attitude, both as expressed at the last work session and tonight. It would have been really easy to have taken it in a different way, and that's, at the end of the day, that's why I think we're very comfortable that
Yes.
you're the pro tem. We just say that, and I think that's important. I think, Ed, your suggestion, I think, does sound like it's changing the charter, and I'm a little nervous about making any changing in the charter to institutionalize the rotation.
I don't think that would be a change in the charter.
Well, that's, okay.
And it's just me, I'd talk to Jimmy.
Okay, we'll move on to Bell Park property. We will keep it on our agenda for our next meeting. I don't think, Mr. Manager, you're ready for it tonight, is that right?
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Discussion of our City of Madison district boundary changes, and I've talked to all our council members. They are pretty much in agreement with the change that has been made in our districts. So now we're gonna need to get our city clerk to advertise for a public hearing, I guess, for the changes.
Yes, sir. We're going to have to advertise for a couple of weeks in the legal organ. We have to have 2 public hearings. There's, what does it say, no less than 60 days apart. Let me read it to y'all.
It's a charter amendment that has to be noticed.
Okay.
And I'll keep a copy of the document on file, and I believe there has to be one over.
I've talked with Ashley about it. She knows exactly what to do.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is this considered I think one of the regulations too is 2 consecutive meetings?
This would not be considered a public hearing because it was not advertised as such. This is
So the
just to
next-
let you all know what the process is going to be, or
So
what
we
will
still have
happen.
to do 2 public hearings starting with the next meeting?
Or whatever schedule we decide upon. I don't think that has been decided yet.
Okay.
What that schedule will look like. Correct, Mr. Jimmy?
Sorry?
That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard what you said, but I didn't know you were talking to me. Yes, that's correct.
Are there any comments from my council members tonight? Are there any public comments tonight? If you would come and state your name, please.
Sue Murray, 535 South Main Street.
Ms. Murray, will you make sure that mic is on, that the green light?
Yeah.
If it's on. Can't tell.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and Council, I would like to speak with you for just a few minutes tonight about an issue that I have spoken to you about in the past, and that is principally traffic, but there's some other issues now. I understand in the work session, there was discussion of the required update to the comprehensive plan that needs to be filed by this summer. You probably do not recall, but I addressed this body when you were considering approval of the comprehensive plan in 2018, specifically because I found the proposed comprehensive plan that you subsequently approved disappointing in that it just glossed over the traffic issues that the city of Madison experiences. The impression conveyed by that comp plan was just if you can't do anything about it, shrug it off kind of thing. And in truth, the traffic issues in Madison are extremely difficult to deal with because you have to deal with DOT and, on the major artery. It is extremely thorny and hard to deal with. But for the comprehensive plan to only spend 3 sentences addressing traffic when it was listed as one of the 10 major issues that citizens had concerns about was disappointing to me and to many members of the community. I don't believe that the city, especially now, with the things that are going on, which I'll discuss in detail in just a moment, can just hang its hat solely on DOT constructing a bypass that may or may not be funded in the near term, and that in the best case scenario, according to DOT, is not going to be completed for years to come. They're talking about 2034 before the bypass is completed. We have a lot of challenges right now. The deepening of the port in Savannah means that we can expect continued increases in freight moving through Georgia, both by truck and rail. A 45% projected increase over the next 10 years, according to DOT. 441 is now a designated freight corridor, and we all know that we've seen large segments of it widen to 4 lanes just south of the city between here and Eatonton now. That's ongoing. US 441 is not only a truck route, but it also is a viable alternate route from Florida to North Carolina for travelers who don't want to deal with the interstate traffic. And we can anticipate ever increasing traffic from that. And then, of course, we have the potential influx of traffic driven by 2 large new developments coming to the area. The Madison Thoroughfare Plan from '07 did a good job addressing traffic and put forth some good proposals on traffic. And yet, it's just been set aside for all of these years, not really followed up on the recommendations of the Thoroughfare Plan from '07 have not been put into place. It's just been cast to the wayside in favor of 3 sentences in the comp plan. I think it is imperative that transportation investments in land use development in the city and around the city be addressed when we're looking at all of this future growth coming down the pike. I am not anti-growth. Sometimes, and I should say that I speak to you on behalf of the Historic Madison Coalition tonight. The coalition is not anti-growth, but we also recognize that with these great opportunities that all of this development gives us, we have to be prepared to embrace that growth in a way that preserves the character of the city, which is, of course, the lifeblood of the city. So I suggest to you that there's some things that Madison absolutely needs to do, and that this council needs to undertake rather immediately. First and foremost, fund a comprehensive traffic study in order to gather expert input into solutions as to how we can better route traffic. I had someone just a couple of weeks ago tell me they used to enjoy coming to Madison to shop downtown, but the last couple of times they'd come, it was so difficult to get through town, they just thought they wouldn't come anymore. We have seen the devastation that has been wrought to other small communities when they didn't control their growth. Look at the city of Decatur, which, 50 years ago was a lovely little city, or look at Marietta. And we don't want to fall into that or anything close to that. So we need a comprehensive traffic study. That's first and foremost. We also need to conduct, I urge you to conduct public meetings, not simply hearings, but public meetings to gather public input on the traffic area and what the public believes should be done. I also urge you to institute a moratorium on new residential development for a period of 6 months, like Monroe has done, like Social Circle has already done, to make sure that the resources are in place before we start building nilly-willy. I also urge you to undertake an immediate study of all of the necessary infrastructure, both physical and personnel-wise, that will be needed to accommodate an influx of new residents. New residents not only use roads, but it's water and power and gas and fire and police and schools, which leads me to the urging the council to consider the tax implications of new development. I recall a chart from, I believe, one of the public input sessions before the last comp plan was when it was being formulated. And the chart put on display in the public meeting had where the vast majority of tax revenue comes from. Industrial property is the greatest tax benefit to the region. Next is industrial. And residential property is a tax loser. It is a tax drain until you get up to about $600,000 houses. If you're talking workforce development houses, it's going to cost the city more in taxes to have that development than it is to not have it. We need to be considering the impact of taxes. And some of these developments have huge tax incentives to come to the state. So is there going to be any tax revenue realized for years for the local community, when the local community is going to be bearing the burden of all of this increased infrastructure, physical and personnel-wise, to accommodate building? I encourage you to invite public comment regarding how much and what kinds of growth are appropriate and desirable for this small town. The city can't just put its head in the sand regarding this issue. Traffic is, in my opinion, a critical issue. Look at the DOT website and look at the traffic counts. Since the major thoroughfare plan, traffic is up almost 20% on Main Street in just a few years. There's no way to widen Main Street. The utilities are, the gas and water lines are buried right next to the street. Twice in 6 months, we had had accidents in front of our house that took out a Georgia Power pole because they are only inches, literally inches off the pavement there because there's nowhere for them to go. We can't widen those roads. Even if it were possible, would it be desirable? Would that not negatively affect the culture of the city? Remember, tourism is the big economic engine. $45 million, the last time I heard, comes into the city from tourism. We can't risk that for, to throw up housing developments or do other such things in a sort of nilly-willy fashion. So I urge you to take a very serious look up front at these issues. That's so much better than trying to solve problems that are created by this on the back end. And if Social Circle and Monroe can institute moratoriums on residential development just for 6 months to make sure that we have a plan in place that is a reasonable plan and preserves the character of the city while also accommodating growth that's going to be a tax benefit to the city and not a tax drain to the city, then to me that seems a smart thing to do. I have most of these comments in writing, and I will leave you each a copy of it and give the city clerk a copy so that you can consider all of this before your next meeting and take appropriate action, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. There ain't no one else? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes.
I look like I have a pain expression. I think I have a torn rotator cuff.
Thank you.
Bless your heart.
Thanks, Celia.